like growing up for you? And I know that you told me a little bit about it, but if we can sort of start for the interview with the beginning and where you were born.
Are we on the air already?
Yes.
And your name?
Yeah, because I have photographs and I don't know.
Yes,
I have some items.
Yeah.
One item, actually.
As we go on, if you think some particular item is relevant, so if you're telling us, for example, from your school, and you have a school picture or you have a picture of a family member or whatever, and you'd like to show us that, then that would be a good time for you to bring it out. What do you think? Would that make sense?
Yes, but if you want...
Do you want to put them out over here? Why don't we put them out?
I think so.
If you could show them to us and talk about them while you show them,
right.
Continue talking.
Right now, you mean?
No, later.
Sure.
Feel like
Of course.
Feel free to do
Of course. I just want to prepare it. I should have prepared it before. My name is Mira Berger, B-E-R-G-E-R, and my maiden name was Kanishchiker, K-A-N-I-S-H-T-S-H-I-K-E-R. It was a long name, I know. And as a student, I had a lot of fun whenever a new teacher came to school, because it took him a long time to learn my name, and I could get away with murder for a while. Anyway, I was born as the daughter of two teachers, both my mother and my father. And I do have here a photograph of my mother as she, I believe, graduated from her teacher's college. I did not save the photograph myself. Somebody had given it to me, some member of the family who was here in the States, and I no longer recall who it was, had my mother's photograph. Would you like to see it?
Yeah, that's good.
And
She could hold it.
Yeah.
And as you see, fashion comes back. We had such clothes worn recently. In fact, I do have a very similar hat. I don't have such a coat or dress, but...
Can you show us just a minute?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Can you see it?
Yeah, just hold it still.
This way?
Yeah, just hold it down a little bit. Fine.
My mother was a very, very talented person, a very bright, talented, creative teacher. And my father was a teacher too. And I have here a photograph of my father in a classroom, not in a classroom, my father with a class of students. And one of the students here is a cousin of mine, and she fled to Soviet Russia as the war started, and she survived the war in Russia and was relocated to Israel. I sent her the papers to come, but...
Could you show us the picture?
Yes, I want to show and explain to you who it is. And so my cousin came to Israel, and she brought this picture with her, the photograph with her. And when I came to visit her, she gave me this photograph. She said, "Here's your father." So this is the photograph. I do not know the year, because she didn't write on the back. It was the year when she apparently, I assume, it was her graduation class. This was an elementary school, and she looks here, they look here as if it was a graduating class from an elementary school. She looks here as if she was 12 or so, or 10, so I don't know. This is my father right here. And my cousin is right here, the second from the right, and my father is the second from the left. Both not in the same row. The teachers here, this row is the row of all the teachers. And I do remember some names, but not all. This was the principal, I remember him. This one survived the war. I did meet her in Israel after the war.
Can you show us your father?
My father is right here, over my finger.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. I had a younger brother, and I have his photograph too. My brother, this is a photograph which was on my brother's diploma. He graduated from it was called Technicum. It was a Jewish technical school on a very high level. Like here, well, I don't want to brag, but it came close to MIT, I would say. I'll have to digress a little bit. The Polish people had made life for the Jewish minority unbearable, or barely bearable. They did not, they limited their acceptance to the Polish universities. And when Jews built high academies and other schools of their own, they did not give them the recognition which the general schools had, which the Polish schools had. So my brother went to this technical school, and he graduated with straight A's. And somehow, after the war, there was the place where there was the ghetto in Vilna. This was a small quarters, a small area between 3 streets.
You'll tell us a lot about that part of your
later.
history a little bit later on. If you can sort of bring us
What would you like me? Yeah.
That would probably be better.
What would you like me to talk about right now?
What your childhood was like, what it was like in Vilna for you in school and so
Okay,
forth.
I will go back to it. Let me just finish the story of this photograph.
Yeah.
I probably tried to show you the photograph a little bit too early. This photograph, his diploma was found by a cousin of ours, a distant cousin of ours, in a pile of garbage. In the area where there was the ghetto. So he found my brother's diploma with this photograph, and he took it, and he kept it. And when I returned to Vilna after the war, he told me, I have a surprise for you. I have your brother's graduation, your brother's diploma. And he gave me the diploma. And I don't have the diploma. Okay, I'll go back to it. I'll come to it later why I don't have the diploma, but I have just the photograph. All right. Well, how was my childhood? Let me go back to my childhood. I began by saying that the Polish government has made life for the Jews very, very difficult. So, my parents were teachers. They both taught in private, what you would say here, private elementary schools for Jews. The government would give nothing, no subsidy of any sort. The poor Jewish people, those poor tailors, the poor shoemakers, the poorest of the poor, were sending their children to the elementary schools in their native tongue. The richer Jews were too snobbish, and they tried to send their children to government schools, which were run in the Polish tongue, the Polish language. So, my father and my mother taught in such an elementary school which was subsidized only by the poorest of the poor. Naturally, they had very little money to pay the teachers. I don't recall how much their monthly salary was, but I do recall vividly that one year my father came and said, this year we were paid 3 months' salaries out of 12. And last year we had 2.5 months salaries. And if they got 4 months salary, they considered it a very good year. Needless to say, I grew up on what you would call in the States poverty level. Very plain. We lived in a very small apartment, one large room and one smaller room, and a small kitchen, a sixth floor walk-up. However, I have to add that there were very few elevators at the time in Vilna, so the walk-up was not a very important detail. But the apartment was very small, and there were 4 of us. My mother used to go in summertime. There was a health organization which was called OZE, and it was organizing summer camps for those poor children, like the Federation does here. And my mother was working in such a summer camp every summer to help make ends meet. My father authored 2 books. He was an expert in Hebrew. He was a Hebrew teacher in those Jewish schools. And he authored 2 books and got some royalties which came to very, very little again. But somehow we grew up, and my father sent both my brother and myself to a Hebrew school, which was called gymnasium. It had both elementary, high school, and an equivalent of 2 years of junior college. It was called gymnasium. I attended it for 12 years. I managed to graduate. For my brother, there was no way to keep him. So he left after the 6th grade and went to this technical institute and graduated from there, because this was mainly a trade school. I survived and managed to graduate from the gymnasium and get a matura, which was the high school diploma. I managed to do that because I supported myself. I was tutoring other students from lower grades, and I was earning money, and I was earning since I was 14 years old. I was earning money to buy my clothes. I had because my father and mother were teachers, we had both, my brother and I had a full scholarship. So we did not pay any tuition. But still, of course, my parents were worried about how he will manage later.
Do you remember any story from that time, any memory that sticks out in your mind from growing up, like a family outing, or to give us a flavor of what your family life was like?
Well, one thing I remember is my mother had an older brother who lived in Latvia, in Dvinsk, the capital city of Latvia. He had a big shoe store, and he came to Vilna to buy a big supply of shoes for his stores. And I remember that in our small apartment, he brought the merchandise, and they were stacked, those boxes with the shoes, one on top of the other, one on top of the other, along the wall, from the ceiling, from the floor till the ceiling. And my parents went with him somewhere, I don't know where, and my brother and I remained at home. And we decided to make order in the boxes. And we removed the boxes, and we opened them. And we decided to put one shoe here and one shoe there. We took out the shoes And we reorganized them, all left ones together and all right ones together. And when my uncle came home and my parents came home, we got a beating. So I remember it.
Do you remember discussions about what it was like to be a Jew in Vilna at the time? Was that something that was discussed in your family?
Of course.
What was that like?
We were very much aware of what life in Poland was, and that there was no future. And that's probably why my father sent us to the Hebrew school. So we were exposed to the Zionist movement, and both my brother and I were members of a Zionist movement, youth movement, and we planned to emigrate to Palestine. The schools where my parents taught, because they had the poorest element, the children of the poorest element, were leaning towards communism. No one in Vilna knew what communism really was like. They knew that in the communist countries or in Soviet Russia, people are equal because nobody has anything. In Poland, one had, the other one didn't have. And they thought that this was an ideal society. The Poles were very, very much anti-communist, and they used those leanings toward the left prevailing in those schools, they used against them as a reason why they couldn't help or why they couldn't support. I do remember that at one point there was one teacher, a woman, that was sought by the police for communist activities. I do remember that my mother wanted to let her stay overnight in our apartment, I believe, in the small apartment, and somehow either my mother wanted her or my father wanted her. One of them wanted to give her shelter, and the other one said, we have two children, we can't risk it. And somehow they went and they found for her another place for that night, and the next day she crossed the border to Soviet Russia. I don't recall it anymore.
Do you remember when what came to be called the Holocaust started for you and your family?
I sure do. I sure do. The war broke out on September 1st. My mother and I were shopping, and we heard over the radio on the street at 1 o'clock an announcement that the German beasts or something like that have crossed our border, and the war has started today. What we didn't know was that the Polish army was smashed right away on the first day, and there was nothing left of them. We thought that they were still fighting or there was something. What people were saying later, that the Poles had their ammunition in the north, and their armed cars or whatever, and their guns in the south. And when the Germans attacked, the ammunition didn't reach the equipment. Whatever the case is, we went home and we listened to the radio, and we found that the Germans had opened with a blitzkrieg, and that they were pushing very hard, and that we heard one day that Warsaw fell, and the other day that this other city fell, and another city fell. And finally, they came pretty close to our own corner. And we were, the shooting was going on all night. We slept on the floor. Yeah. We slept on the floor, and in the morning we found out we found out that the Soviets occupied our city. What happened was that Stalin and Hitler made a pact, and they cut Poland in such a way that Vilna went to the Soviets. We were very happy, thinking that it means freedom. Well, the Soviets plundered the city. During 1 month, the city was emptied of everything.
What was it like for you during that month?
During that month, there wasn't really much, because they kept saying that they made a pact with Lithuania, and they told the Lithuanians, we are going to give you back your capital city. Vilna, I don't know if you know or you don't know, Vilna was the capital city of Lithuania until 1917, when the Poles grabbed it and kept it as their own city. And the Lithuanians had a temporary capital city in Kaunas. And of course Vilna, or as they call it, Vilnius, was extremely important to them. The Soviets told them, we are going to give you back your capital city, which was taken away from you unjustly, in return for military bases across Lithuania, close to the Baltic Sea and Prussia and so on. Of course, little Lithuania, with a population of 2.5 million people, couldn't say no to Big Brother. And so they agreed. So we knew that the Lithuanians were coming, were going to take over, and we thought that we would be free.
Mrs. Berger, let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure, please do, because I can get carried away and...
I'm very taken by how you described, even before the invasion, some of the anti-Semitic things that were going on in Lithuania. And also, the way in which you were able to surround yourself with the Zionist movement, and also within a family that very much prized intellectual values. And I get the sense that's very important to you. Do you have any feelings about what it was like, even before the Blitzkrieg, to grow up in a family with such strong values, scholarship, integrity, and to grow up poor, and to grow up persecuted against? Were you mad? Were you...
Whether I was mad?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if being mad is the right description. I grew up feeling strongly that I have to leave, that it's no place for us to stay. We took it as a temporary. We never were... We didn't feel much love for Poland. In fact, that feeling remained until today. And when we heard, for example, that there is a martial law in Poland, or that they suffer, I said, I have no tears to shed.
Yes, I know many people who are anxiously awaiting the Russian invasion of Poland.
Oh, well. Oh, you mean now?
Now, I mean last year, and looking forward to it as a revenge.
I have other things to think about than looking forward to this or that. But as I said, I have no tears to shed.
How did the story then evolve in terms of your own, after the Russians apparently took over, and they took over Vilna, and they returned Vilna to the Lithuanians?
Yes, within a month, they left and the Lithuanians came.
So your feeling was everything's all right now?
Yes, we hoped.
Yeah.
We hoped that we will be able to survive the war under these circumstances.
And everybody breathed a sigh of relief? No.
Yes and no, because Big Brother remained behind the scene at all times. In other words, in the Jewish community, the people who took over all the leading positions were former communists. under the Lithuanians, because the Lithuanians, when they came in, they were declared the 17th Lithuanian Soviet Republic, or the 17th Soviet Republic of Lithuania, or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember which word was first, but anyway, this was that. It was the 17th Soviet Republic, with the Lithuanian, and they came and they took over the university. I was at the time a student at the university, and immediately they said, the university is going to be, as of today, the university is a Lithuanian university, and everybody must study the Lithuanian language. They organized courses for 4 to 6 hours a day, and teachers and students alike went to study. Obviously, you see, the younger ones studied faster, as usually. And I had a gift for languages, and I studied it. But it was a very tough language, because it has no similarity to any other language that I knew. It is not a Slavonic language. The closest it comes to is Sanskrit. If you heard of it, you probably did. So, every word, there were a lot of diphthongs, a lot of those onomatopoeia, those simulating nature's sounds. Words simulated. That's what I wanted. Onomatopoeia, I believe it's called. Yeah. I was trying to remember the word. Yeah. Anyway, I studied it, and I mastered it, and that's how I saved my life.
How so?
The language, my knowledge of Lithuanian saved my life.
How so?
How is that? Because when the Germans came, you see, the love affair with Lithuania and between Stalin and Hitler lasted roughly 2 years. Then the Germans, of course, pushed forward to Russia, and they took over Vilna. And when they took over Vilna, they put us in a ghetto.
Do you remember that day?
I remember that day. I believe, yeah, I think it was the 23rd of September, 41.
Did you have any thought of leaving to Russia before that?
Well, you see, what happened was they had it very well organized. First they came and they said that they are coming to take the young people for work. And they took every young man from the house, my brother included.
Who's they now?
The Germans and the Poles did help them, but the German soldiers.
But this is before. This is after the German.
This is before
occupation.
The ghetto.
But this is after the German occupation.
Yes.
What about during the period when the Russians were in Vilna, or the
Lithuanians?
Yeah, right. Was there any talk in your family of moving further into Russia?
It was impossible. Into Russia, moving into Russia. There was no need. We were in a much better position than the Russian people or Russian Jews. We had food. The Lithuanians brought a lot of food. And the population was so hungry. They brought military trucks with big kettles full of soup. Everybody went online and got a dish of soup, full of soup. This was at the beginning, but then...
What was that like? I mean, was that like... was there a feeling of being saved, of familiarity, of...
In my family, definitely. We were very happy to have... We very much preferred the Lithuanians to the Soviets.
Yeah.
And if you want some stories, some funny thing about it, I can tell you about it, if you have the time.
I think that the history part itself are things that are fairly well documentable or known. What we don't know is your experience.
Well,
and that's what we would like to.
All right, I'll try to give you just that. So when the Soviets entered Vilna, when they took it over, which was like 6 weeks after September 1st, which means like the middle of October, when they came in, the first group before the Lithuania, before they gave it to Lithuania. They had first-class cadres, you know, the soldiers were very much trained, very well trained to approach the population and answer all kinds of questions about Soviet Russia the way they wanted it. So they were trained to such an extent that no matter what you asked them, they answered, and all of them answered, "Oh, у нас все есть. We have everything. We have everything. We have big factories for this and for that." You know, Jewish people get right away the feeling when something is wrong, and so some came over to them and said, "Do you have oranges in Soviet Russia?" And they said, "Yes, we have a lot of factories of this. We have a lot of
Orange factors.
orange factories." Then, of course, as I told you, they plundered the city. The wives of the highest officers went into every store and bought whatever they could. There was nothing of it like it in Russia. And they came into lingerie stores, and they found nightgowns. You know, acetate nightgowns with some embroideries, with some laces. And they said to each other, "Those are beautiful, beautiful party dresses."
I'd like to interrupt you for a second. I'm curious how you know all this.
You heard, you saw. Moshe told me, Yankel said, I wouldn't sign a guarantee that it was like this, but people did see them. People did hear them. I mean, I heard myself soldiers saying, "У нас все есть." This became a sentence which you could hear 20 times a day. In every corner of the city, no matter where you met a Soviet soldier, they were very friendly. You could come over, you could ask. And the answer was, "We have everything. We have huge factories for everything. You name it, we have it."
Okay, and what were you doing while all this was going on?
Well, not much, because everybody was expecting the day when the Lithuanians will come in and then life will get organized. Mm-hmm. We couldn't do much.
So what were you doing?
Well, to tell you frankly, walking, meeting friends, talking, making a meal.
What about school? Had you graduated from the gymnasium?
Oh, yes, yes. Okay. I had graduated from the gymnasium and from the teachers' college too. I managed to have that too. And my brother graduated too. And so what happened was that, as I said, I just entered the university, mm-hmm. and the Lithuanians came, and they turned the school immediately into Lithuanian, and they said that by the end of the first academic year, which means by June 1940, each of the students will have to take an exam, an equivalent to a matura in Lithuanian. They gave us at the end of the first semester, like in mid-year, we had to take a test, an equivalent to a graduation of their elementary school. And at the end of the year, we were supposed to pass a test, an equivalent of a gymnasium.
What was it like on the day the Germans took over Vilna? Do you remember that day yourself? Your own experience of it?
Yes, I remember. I can't say that I remember that day anymore. I remember other days.
Oh, good.
During this particular initial period of the occupation. Everybody thought this was the end. The end has come for us. I mean, nobody had any illusions as to what we could expect. However, since they were so well organized, it took us some time to find out their tactics of the murdering. So, the first day, or the first...
Did you say of the murdering?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I say, yes.
Okay.
That's what I said, yes. When they collected all the young men and they took them to the prison, because this was a big place where they could collect them, we did not know that they were taking them from the prison, that first of all they were beating them up, and then they were taking them to Ponari, which was a forest about 5 miles outside of the city, a forest which we used as children, which was used to go for outings, and that they will shoot them. They will force them there to build to dig their own graves in rows, and they will shoot them. The security was, they had, the Ukrainians were very good at murdering, but still they would, the Germans and some Poles volunteered for the good job. They gave them a lot to drink, and they gave them arms. They told the Jews to undress. After they...
What was it like for you?
My brother was among those.
So, do you remember when they came to take your brother? What was that like? Was there like a lot of goodbyes, or was it like, I'll see you next week?
I don't think I can answer it. They took him. They didn't permit us. There was no way to say a lot of goodbyes.
Yeah.
My father was in the room. They came in. The 4 of us were in the room. They said he is going with us. And as for about my father,
The room, that was your apartment?
yeah,
So they came into your apartment?
yes,
Did they knock on the door?
I don't remember.
And they then walked up 6 flights of stairs?
Yes.
And they came into the room?
Yeah, and said the
they
young
said,
man goes with us for work.
The young man goes with us.
And to my father they said, you are too old, you stay here, you remain here. And so we went, both my mother and I followed him. They collected the men in across the street, or 2 or 3 blocks across the street, and 2 or 3 blocks to the left, there was a place where it's called Sagenia, where they made bricks. A brick factory, sort of, and there they kept the men until they collected them from many places, from many houses.
And you followed them?
I followed. I went with my mother to see my brother off, and I had taken with me.
What was your brother's name?
My brother's name was Samuel, but we called him Mula, and so I took with me one of my dresses. And I told my brother, listen, Mula, we don't know what they're going to do. Go into the bathroom, put on my dress, and come home with me. And he
You said this through the...
I said it to him. You see, I could talk to him. I talked to him Hebrew. I said, take my dress, go into the bathroom. There was a public bathroom. I said, let me go with you, not too far. I'll give you my dress from under this. Put on my dress and come with me home. And he refused. He didn't think that he would be murdered the same night. I repeat the word. That's the word I use for the Nazis.
So you
and my
tried
mother,
to convince him. Your mother was there too?
My mother was there too, and he didn't want to go. Then they put them and they arranged them in lines, and they took them to Lukishki, to the prison, the city prison. And my mother went along on the sidewalk, and as they entered the prison, she stood behind the gates for I don't know how long, an hour or 2. And after that, she saw them being let out.
Were there other people too, or was she there alone?
There were a lot of wives and mothers, naturally. And she went. She waited near the gate, and then she saw him once more taken out, and he looked terrible because he was beaten. They beat them with whatever they had. They beat them, and then they took them, after they were beaten properly, they took them to Ponari. And we heard shootings all night long, and we didn't understand what the shootings were. Later, some weeks later, When the Ukrainians and the Poles got tired of killing the Jews, the security became more lax. And then a few people managed, who weren't killed in the hail of bullets, managed to go out of the ravines and save themselves, go to walk naked or half naked to some farmers who lived in the neighborhoods. And those helped a few of them, and then they came back. By that time we were in the ghetto. They came back to the ghetto. One of them was a teacher who taught in the same school with my mother. We knew them personally, knew her personally, and she told us the whole story, the horror. And yet, at that time, still there were people in the ghetto who refused to believe.
How did you, was the ghetto built around you, or were you moved to the ghetto?
The ghetto was built in the former Jewish center of the city. There were a few narrow streets, like 2 long narrow streets and connecting short streets. They built, and as those were houses, they built a fence with barbed wire around every opening which led from the buildings to the city itself. In other words, to the if let's say if this was the ghetto, and it looked more like a triangle, not exactly, but like this. If this was the ghetto, these were houses, here were houses. Here were no houses because here was the street continued. So here they built a wall, a real tall wall. Here they built a real tall wall. Here, wherever the houses were, any house that had a doorway to the outside, to the street which was here and was not included in the ghetto, they blocked it with bricks. Then here there was a gate, and here there was a gate to bring in supplies, in fact the other gate was right here. Here was one gate, and here was one gate, and of course
they built the ghetto around you?
No. I
You were
lived in
outside?
it. Oh, sure. So what they did was, and here this is how it connects with my brothers, that they collected all the young men night after night after night for several weeks. Then they first said that all Jews have to wear this yellow star. This was one ordinance, then there were other ordinances. Then they said, in the morning we got up, we didn't know anything. We didn't know of anything. In the morning we got up and we looked out the window and we saw that a lot of Jews are carrying bundles and they are being escorted by Germans. So my father and my mother said, well, or the 3 of us said, well, obviously we're being deported somewhere. We didn't know where we were deported. Then came the knock at our door in our building, and they said, you have 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I don't remember how many minutes they gave us. You have so many and so many minutes to take anything you wish. You are being deported to a ghetto. Take what you want. Well, we had little time to talk. We took our clothes. We took some food with us. And we went. They took us down to the street. Everybody took as much as he she could carry. And we carried, of course, heavy packages. We barely. But that's it. We walked. They walked us about a mile to where the ghetto was, and then we went in, and we were so crowded that.
Well, how did you manage that? You were crowded. Means what? You went. How did you? Yeah, good.
Everybody sat down on the ground. Those who came first, and the people who lived closer to those streets were brought in first. So they moved into the apartments that were in the buildings here. You see, here was a row of buildings, here was a row of buildings, here was about 3 or 4 rows of buildings. So those who came in first entered into apartments, occupied apartments.
Those were empty?
Yes, they were empty because they emptied them before. You see, they took the people from there. They told them that they are taking... Yeah, I forgot to say something. Actually, they made immediately two ghettos. The larger ghetto and the smaller ghetto. They took the people from the smaller ghetto a little further away, and they took them to Ponare. They killed them all. They took the people from the larger ghetto. They killed them all. So we had empty apartments, and they told us there's a ghetto 1 and ghetto 2. We were lucky to come to ghetto 1, but by the time we arrived, we could only sit down in a hallway. The three of us sat down on our packages in a hallway. And night came, and we cuddled, the three of us together, in a corner of that hallway. In the middle of the night, it turned out, the Germans came in and they collected all the people who were in the streets because they were so crowded. They knew that they will have it would be overcrowded. They took all those who were sitting in the streets, not in the hallway, and they told them, you are being moved to ghetto 2. You are here by mistake. Instead, they took them to Lokishkin, to Ponare, and they killed them. They did the same thing with the people who were in ghetto 1, in ghetto 2. They told them they are taking them to ghetto 1.
So, but you knew none of this. You thought that all these people had gone to ghetto 1.
Sure, to ghetto 2 from ghetto 1.
Ghetto 2.
Yes.
So, when morning came, you were...
Morning came, it was much more, there was much more room. Much more room. But it went on for several nights.
In the hallway?
Yeah. And by morning, we walked and we met some people whom we knew. There was a mother of some former students of my parents who lived across the street from us, and she said, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Kanishchiker, I live in a room. There are 4 families in the room, but there's one bed there. Come in and have the bed. She took us into that room. Mm-hmm. And in that room, on the bed, which the 3 of us shared, this was our apartment for the next practically 2 years.
Mm-hmm. What was life like then for you in that apartment?
Well, again, since we were teachers, and at the beginning they didn't let anybody out. We couldn't get out. So...
Out of the ghetto?
Out of the ghetto. Then we began to think, what are we going to do with the children? After all, we were teachers, and we said, as long as there are children, we have to help them. People used to immediately were taken for work. The able-bodied men were called out of the ghetto, and they were put to work in several factories for the Germans, in several other places. They were put to work. And in the morning they would go out of the ghetto, in the evening they would be returned, under guard, of course. So what we could do was those people, those lucky ones who got, it was called a shine, a certificate which permitted them to go out of the ghetto and come back to the ghetto. Those who didn't have such a shine could only offer somebody who did have such a shine, listen, I want to sell a pair of shoes. I want to sell this. So this is how trade went on. Those who went out of the ghetto were meeting the Christian population, and the trade was going on. And so you could trade for bread, or something else.
Did you have one of these passes?
Did I have what?
Did you have one of these passes?
Not at the beginning. I got such a pass about a month later. But during these first months, we decided, my mother, my father, and I myself, decided to do something about the children. And we walked, and immediately there was created a Jewish authority, a Jewish, not community center, a Jewish kehillah, well, Jewish
community.
A community, and of course there was a head of the community. It was called Judenrat.
This was created by the Germans?
By the Germans.
Yeah.
By the Germans, with the help of some Jews who decided to be the first to take charge. And we went to them and we said, listen, we would like to take care of the children. We don't know how long we'll be here. Maybe if we won't survive, all of us, maybe some will survive. Let's take care of the children. So they let us, they said, well, there's an empty store, a vacant store. If you want to take care of that store, if you want to build whatever you want to, go ahead. My mother and I went and we washed, scraped the floors. It was a store. It was a pretty big space on the ground floor, on the street floor. We scraped the floors, and we went to people and said, listen, we want to teach your children. And some agreed to send their children, and some said, that's a very bad idea, because if you have the children concentrated in one place and the Germans will find out, if you have the children concentrated in one place and the Germans will find out, they'll come and just collect all our children and they'll kill them. So there was a lot of reluctance. But we said we will keep the door closed, locked. And slowly but surely, we got a number of children. However, like a month or so later, I was fortunate enough, somebody lent me a pass. He was sick or she was sick, she said, take my pass for today, go out for a day. Maybe you can buy something, you can help something. And this group went to a place, to a garden school, a gardening school. There was a garden school, a Lithuanian garden school. Again, on the outskirts of the city. So we walked there, and as we came in, I began to speak Lithuanian. Naturally, I went into the office and I said, well, I speak Lithuanian, I know Lithuanian, and I know German. Do you think I could be of any help to you? And they said, really? You know both? How do you speak Lithuanian so well? Do you come from Lithuania? I said, no, I studied here. Wonderful one. Do you speak German too? Yes. We need you. I said, well, I don't have a pass. Could you get for me a pass? Of course. They got for me a pass, and they got me to work in their office. This made our life, saved our life for a while, because what we did was all those who went out, who were going out of the city, out of the ghetto, learned quickly a certain trick. We took like a pillowcase. We took a pillowcase, and if you took the sewing machine and you made here and you sewed straight lines, you got here channels. We went, of course I was there, this was on the outskirts of the city, farmers were there. They were glad to exchange. It was called a pound, but it's not the American pound, it was the Russian pound. The Russian pound was about
Talking about kilo?
Yeah, no, not kilo. A pound. Well, I think I don't remember anymore what it was, what the unit was. But when we bought such a unit, it was pretty heavy. It was, let's say, if you translate it to American weights, or it would be about 30 pounds or 40 pounds. Yeah, it was a big bag of flour, and we would sit there during our lunchtime and pour the flour into those channels. And we also sewed such flaps here, and we made sure that we could put it on, like and we had here a girdle, and we tied it around our body. All of us lost weight, of course, you can imagine, and our coats were big enough to accommodate our body plus the flour around.
Literally a life preserver. You were wearing a life preserver jacket.
Well, you can say that if you wish. And we were carrying it, those 2-3 kilometers which we had, and we were coming to the gates. There were Jewish policemen which were supposed to make sure that nothing is smuggled in. They did not touch us to find out whether we have flour. Only if German soldiers were they would touch and try. And a friend of mine was caught with some flour, and she was taken to Lukishki and was killed because she was caught with the flour. So when I came in the evening with the flour, I went to the baker. I would give my flour, and I would get in return a big loaf of bread, which was, what I know, a loaf of bread which was like here about 2 pounds, 3 pounds of bread. And I also, since I worked in this garden school, and they were very grateful to me that I helped them with the German writing, etc., they would give me all kinds of things. They would give me a little bit of butter, a little bit of other fat, a little bit of some eggs, whatever I could carry on my body. I didn't want to carry eggs, of course, unless I boiled them, unless they were hard-boiled. They would give me all kinds of things that I could carry on my body, not in my hands. They wouldn't permit to carry, it was very dangerous to carry something in your hand. But this made it possible by my going to this garden school to work. I was able to support my parents and myself for nearly 2 years in the ghetto, until the ghetto was liquidated. Now, in the ghetto, I have here something I want to show you. In the ghetto, I had my winter coat. And this is the material of my winter coat. This was the right size. I wore it all through the war. And when I arrived in Israel, it was pretty shabby and had some signs of wear and tear on it. So I went to a dressmaker and I told her, do you think I could have a dress, a skirt, and a vest made out of the material that you have in this coat? And she said yes. So she made a skirt, which I no longer have, and she made this vest. And this vest is the only thing that I have that survived the war with me.
It's wonderful.
I'm not going to part with it.
No, I just want to do interesting material.
And you wore the coat?
I wore this, yes, I wore this. I think I could still fit in if I took my glasses off. Yes, I wore this for a while until the dress gave up. Then I stopped wearing this either, but I carry it with, I have it. It's with me.
So for 2 years you survived that way, every day
Yes.
going. You would go 7 days, 5 days?
I think it was 6 days, not 7 days.
Yeah.
I think we did, or maybe it was 5 days. I don't remember really. That's a good question, but I don't recall.
Well, was there a lot of fear that you lived under there? I imagine there must have been.
Well, you know what it is.
Inside the ghetto, and not obviously going in must have been frightening.
You feel safe after a while. You adjust. Nobody can live in constant fear. You know something? There was an amazingly small number of suicides in the ghetto. An amazingly small number. One man, a very intelligent, bright man, committed suicide the first night when we were sitting there in the hallway. He committed suicide somewhere. He hung himself. But there was an amazingly small number. Everybody hoped he will survive. And I heard there was, of course, the underground began to get organized, and some people from the underground in Warsaw managed to come to the ghetto in Vilna, and they told us what's going on in Warsaw. And they said that in Warsaw, the Germans say that they will leave enough Jews to board one bus, one public bus. And every Jew in the ghetto thought and believed that he will be on that bus. You don't follow me?
I follow you perfectly.
You do.
And that's the way people in Vilna also felt.
That's
that
life.
they would
That's life. If you're a psychologist, you may be surprised, but this is what it is. People adjust. And one's corner somehow presents a certain safety. And if you go out every day, you come back every day. There is a safety in numbers. What's the expression?
Safety in numbers.
Okay. The numbers weren't too big.
You also mentioned that you had supported your parents.
Sure.
With the
With
bread
the
that
food.
was traded
Sure.
to. In what way did you support them? Did you trade the bread for other things? How exactly did you go about supporting them?
There was nothing to trade.
Wasn't that loaf of bread very valuable?
Well,
in the
of
ghetto?
course.
So what did you trade
Weren't
that
my
for?
parents very valuable? We sold one. You see, for the flour that I was supposed to get, I had to give something in return. So we sold what we brought with us. The three of us carried on our backs. We carried all kinds of things I don't remember anymore. But then inside the ghetto, for example, all kinds of Jews began trading all kinds of things. And you could get for some money, somebody had all kinds of junk jewelry. The farmers, they liked the junk jewelry. I bought the junk jewelry.
Could you explain to us
Yes.
exactly how a trade would take place, and give us an example of a real trade that happened, an important trade that stands out in your mind?
All right. An important trade, I don't know which is important, which is not
Important to you.
important. Yeah, no. Well, for example, as I said, this junk jewelry, they had dress fitted somebody and they liked it. She would give me a bag of flour, and I said, well, I need some money too. So she would give me, let's say, a bag of flour and whatever the amount was, 20, 50, whatever, Lithuanian money. And by the way, I no longer remember what, I think it was rubles. I think that the money that was changing hands was Russian rubles. Don't quote me. I may have forgotten, but as far as I remember, there were rubles. So they would give me some rubles and some flour. The flour went to the baker in exchange for bread. The rubles I could use for whatever I needed, for whatever else I needed. I brought flour, somebody else would bring butter. Somebody had arranged that, let's say, a farmer would bring to the ghetto and bring something through a window. You see, there were all kinds of ways that people traded. Not everybody went out and carried the flour on his back. So, for the few rubles that I had, I could buy merchandise that was offered in the ghetto. I do remember that I bought those golden rings, those so-called golden rings. And the farmers said, oh, it's a golden ring. And I would say, no, it is not gold. I do not sell it as gold. I was afraid they'll kill me if they find out. I mean, you can't cheat. I would say, no, it's not gold. I was told it is a metal other than gold. But they were happy to care, and they gave me a lot of money for those so-called rings, golden rings. I did not trade with my parents.
I didn't think you did.
Because he asked me what did I get in return for the bread.
Right, I was wondering if you had traded the bread to other Jews in the ghetto to help support your parents.
I don't know. I never traded the bread. I didn't have enough to trade.
I see.
I would get one loaf of bread, so I would have to make some sort of a sandwich to take with me to work, and my parents ate the rest. We had no surplus of bread. But we weren't hungry either after I began to work there.
Was there a time when that door to the city of Vilna became
ghetto,
closed, when the ghetto was closed, sealed?
Oh yes, it was sealed practically at all times. They would open it. They would open it for the people to go out to work, and they would close it right after that.
So was that all the way through the war?
All the way through the times the ghetto existed.
Yeah.
And while the ghetto existed, there were several purgings or what?
Purges, yeah.
Purges conducted, and this was called action. And they would come in the evening and they would say they need so many and so many work. They would come to the Judenrat and they would say they need 1,000 Jews. And they wanted the Judenrat to make the selection. And when the Judenrat refused, they took the head of the Judenrat and they murdered him. Then they would say they need people in Ghetto 2. They would move from Ghetto 2 to... This went on. There were several times such purges. Then they said one day, and this was, I believe, on Yom Kippur, they said that they have to vacate the ghetto completely. And they gave out shines, which means they gave out certificates for the people who were allowed to go out to work. This was, by the way, excuse me, this was before I went to work. This was during the first month or so, while we were still building the school in the ghetto, was this big Yom Kippur action when they took all the workers out, and my parents and I hid in some, this was called Malina. They called it, Malina is a place where thieves used to hide. And so we built like a false wall in that room where we lived, and we hid that together with the family that came, that took us in.
How did you know it was coming?
Oh, they said that they are taking out all the workers for 2 days because the ghetto will have to be completely, they will leave in Vilna only those who are working. They will not leave, and their families, they will not leave anybody who is not working. And so we hid, and we were lucky we weren't caught.
I see.
And only after that I went to work.
So you worked until when at this garden school?
Until then they closed the ghetto. That's what happened. They sealed the ghetto. They sealed the ghetto, and this was again in the fall. They sealed, I think so, maybe it was summer. I don't remember. They sealed the ghetto, and then they came to this community center and they said, everybody goes to work. The ghetto is going to be sealed. There will be no more Jews left in the ghetto. By the way, after that action that I told you, Yom Kippur, where they took out really all their workers, they didn't take them out for 2 days, but for 1 day only. They really went from house to house, and whomever they found, they took. And these people never returned. And when the workers came, of course, they found that those who were gone were gone. And then they said, after this action, there will be no more actions. Those who prefer to believe them, but there was really no choice. You had to believe them, because what else could you do?
You still lived in the Melina, or you lived?
No. In the Melina, it was a small place, it was like a closet.
Yeah.
We only survived during this, when we heard them come in and we heard them look. You see, we made the Malina so that we had like a piano in front of the door. We pulled the piano by the leg to block the entrance to our Malina. And so when they came, they didn't go behind it. They knocked here, they knocked there, and of course we didn't put out a sound, so they didn't catch us.
So when they sealed the ghetto, do you remember that day?
Of course.
What was that like?
So my father got up in the morning and he said, I'm going to the camp. And my mother and I said, we don't want to go. And so we parted. My father went, and we remained in the Melina.
So that was the last time you saw your father?
That was the last time I saw my father, and later acquaintances told us that he got tired of all this, and he said, I'm not going to fill their orders, let them kill me. So they took them in the shot.
Did you try to convince your father to stay with you?
Yes, we did, but it was a half-hearted way of him. You see, we didn't know what's better. He tried to convince us to come with him. Mm-hmm. And I still don't know. Maybe if we went with him, maybe my mother would survive. Maybe the three of us would perish. I don't know. Because here comes, of course, the horrible story, the most horrible story of my life. We stayed in the Malina, my mother and I stayed in the Malina for about 8 days or so. And at night, we would go out in the street.
And you were the only two, or the other family was there too?
The other family left.
Mm-hmm.
The other family was there too. Yeah, I'm sorry. The mother and daughter. Yeah, there was only a mother and daughter left. The mother and daughter was there, and we were there, and some woman, two sisters who lived also in the same apartment. All of us went into the Malina, and during the day we were staying there in the Malina, and the evening we would go out to the street to find some porter and see whether there are other Jews. And there were other Jews in other Malinas left in the ghetto. So at night we would congregate and quietly see if anybody had a radio, if they heard anything. And news were flying, of course. You couldn't believe what kind of stories you could hear. But anyway, everybody hoped to survive. And then came a day when the Germans decided that they are going to really do a real thorough search, and they'll finish with whomever it was.
About a week afterwards?
About maybe 8 days, yes, yeah. Maybe 10 days, I don't know more.
Not long after?
No, not longer than 10 days. Then they came and they went from house to house, and they really moved this away, and they found us, and they took us all to the main street of the ghetto, near the gate. And my mother kept my brother's photograph and was pressing it to her heart. So the German soldier pulled it out of her hand and trampled it, threw it at the floor and trampled it. They took us from there to the police station. Not too far from there, a few blocks from there was the Vilna police station. They took us in there, and I was wearing this winter coat, and I was wearing heavy winter shoes, and I had some two dresses on top of one on top of the other, and we walked, and as we entered the police station, which was called in Polish only to any commissariat, the policeman walked first. There was one policeman first and another one in the back. A policeman or maybe a German soldier, I don't remember. This I don't remember. And he walked in, and if here was the door, the main door, and here was the street, we walked in like here. It was a short corridor here, with two doors, one here, one here. Then he walked with us, and he walked from one through a long hallway, and there were somehow rooms on both sides, or rooms on one side of it, I don't remember, but it was a very long hallway, and he brought us all the way to the back, and here was a room. He let us all in and locked the door, and I was sitting near the door, outside of the door. At this point, I told my mother, listen, Mom, they are going to take us from here most probably to Ponare and shoot us. I am not going to carry my body to where they want me to be buried. They will have to shoot me somewhere else and carry my body. I'm going to try to run out of here, of this police station. Promise me, please, if I don't come back, you should know that I am free, that I succeeded. Let's meet tonight in a home not too far from this gardening school. Lived a woman with her daughter who was the janitor in the school where my mother was teaching, and we were very friendly with her. I said, let's meet in her home, and let's do it this way. I'm going to try to flee from here. If I don't come back, I want you to get off while they walk you to Pondare or wherever they walk you. I want you to get off to the sidewalk. And if you do, others will do too, and you may succeed. Will you promise me to do so? If you promise me, then I try to flee. If you don't promise me, we'll both be dead. She said, okay, I promise. So we kissed each other, And I started banging in the door. And the policeman opened the door. This was a Lithuanian policeman was sitting there. Opened the door, put his head in. What do you want? I said, I want to the bathroom. So he said, who else wants to the bathroom? 5 or 6 or 7 women said they want to the bathroom too. Fine. So he collects us all. And he is first, and I am right behind him. And 5 or 6 or 7 women are behind me. And we walk, and I'm looking both ways, and I see that we walk all the way back where we came to. And funnily enough, here is the door to the street, and here is the door to the bathroom. Just across the door, the entrance. So I walk into the bathroom, and of course, I didn't think of the bathroom much, and I got very, very quickly ready. I had a watch, a good watch on me, so I took my watch. It was on a metal band, and I pull it up high. And I'm out of the cubicle, and I'm near the door. I'm very near the door, and the others take time. They are hiding their jewelry, and they're doing what they're doing. They take their time. Meanwhile, the policeman lost his patience. So he puts his head into the door like this. Here was somehow the door. I no longer remember which way the door went. He pushed the door, and he turned the head, and he said, now how much longer do you want to stay here? As he was talking to them, I sneaked out. Out from here, out the door, out here, and straight into the street. And I started walking. I didn't run, I walked. And I said to myself, I knew the neighborhood. There were side streets where I thought if I reach this side street here, he won't see me anymore. However, I was wearing a winter coat on a hot day and shoes which no one in the whole city of Vilna wore at that day. While in the room, I took off the star, and I gave it to my mother. I took off the star, so I had no star, but I looked very suspicious. As I walked slowly, I walked here, I came here, and I was in this street, which walked this way, but I heard heavy steps behind me. I knew exactly who was going behind me. So I decided, rather than let him catch me a little later, why don't I stop and talk to him right here? And I stopped. I waited for him, and he came over. And I said, did you have to go after me? No answer. I said, why did you go after? Why are you following me? What do you have against me? What did I do to you? No answer. I said, listen. And I speak Lithuanian, of course, to him, and a good Lithuanian, a literary Lithuanian. I said, now listen. I have Lithuanian friends, very good ones, in the university and in the gardening school, everywhere. All of them have tried before and are willing to help me now. I have a place to go to. Do you really want to interfere? Do you really want to stop them from helping me? He said, you make a right, because if we reach here, you make a left. He said, you make a left and you go back. I said, no, sir, I'm not going back. You have a gun, you can shoot me right here, and then you'll be able to tell everybody that you shot without weapons. Unarmed. You'll be able to tell everybody, all your friends, you were a hero, you shot an unarmed Jewess. Is that what you want? He said to me, why is it, tell me, why is it that the Jews are going so, not willingly, but without protest to the gas chambers, etc.? I said, that's not true. A, they are not going willingly, and B, I know of plenty of Poles, I say thousands of Poles, who live I didn't tell him about Lithuanians, because this wouldn't go well with him. I said, thousands of Poles who live on their farms, in their homes, have everything and are free to move and are free to have arms, all of them are taken by the Germans and killed like flies. What can you say about Jews who have nothing? We were robbed of everything. We don't have our homes. We don't have anything. We have no arms. We have no money. We were cleaned of everything. That's not called going like sheep. I said to him. Then I said, look. And we walk slowly. And here I'm almost coming to the corner where he wants me to make a left. I said, listen, I have a gold watch. And that's all I have, and I'm going to give it to you. And I started pulling the watch as we walked, and I had the watch in my hand. I said, I have this watch. I'll give it to you, and you go back alone. He said, no. I left and back. When we came to the corner, right to the corner, and I said, you can shoot me right here if you want to. I'm not going to move. I took the watch, and I pushed the watch into his hand. He pushed my hand back with the watch, and he said, you will need it more than I. Keep it, go, and God bless you. I didn't turn around, and I said, God bless you too. And I walked. And I went, and I managed to get to this woman, and in the evening I managed to get to one of the teachers of the garden school, and I entered his apartment. And he said, you know, it's very risky for me to keep you. I said, let me write to another one. Another teacher, a Lithuanian of that school, had moved meanwhile deep in Lithuania to a city called Rietavas. And he was there a teacher in another gardening school. And I had written to him a letter saying that there was an epidemic in our town, a very heavy epidemic. My parents died. I was sick too, but I survived. And the doctor tells me that I need fresh air. Do you think I could come to stay with you for a while to recuperate? And he answered with a telegram saying, after you've taken care of everything, you may come. Meaning, if I have a passport, I may come. And I had already a passport.
How did you get it?
Well, I skipped a big part, really. I skipped a big part because after I ran out, I didn't have the passport yet at this point. That meant at the time there was a small triangle, another triangle left in the city, which had only like one block. One big building, much less than a city block here. It was called a camp inside the city where the Germans took the furriers. And they kept the Jewish furriers with their families. They needed the furriers very badly because the furriers made for them the warm coats, the fur coats, which they needed when they went on the Russian front. And so there were some of them were furriers, and some of them were as family. And I knew of one family of friends who were there in Kailis. That man, I told him, he said, I can't keep you very long. I'll keep you a few days. I can't keep you long because it's very dangerous. So I said, all right, take me there. There are Jews there. Take me there at night. And he was a big man, a 7-footer, big and heavy. So at night, he took me there to Kailis. And we walked around and we found a place where there was a big, they had in Vilna big cubicles, receptacle for garbage. And it was made out of wood. It was a big crate. And he lifted me up high up to the fence, over the fence. And I stood on the fence and I jumped on that. And then he left. And I got off this box. How I didn't break a leg, I don't know, but I didn't. And there was, of course, still the problem, how do I get into the building? Because there was like 4 or so entrances to the buildings, and I didn't know what building they lived in, and I saw that people were sitting there. My eyes were trained to the dark. I was sitting for a while on this garbage can, and then I decided I have no choice. It's better at night than during the day. I decided, so I came over to the door, and I said to the policeman, "Tell me, what room are the Belkins in?" He said, "Walk up on the third floor, room whatever, 45 or 4 or whatever." And I walked to the third floor, and I knocked at the door, and when they saw me, they almost flipped over. And I said, "Well, here I am, and I'm alone." And they said, "Come in. We sleep 3 in a bed, you'll be the 4th one." And I stayed there, and of course they were strangers. While in the ghetto, I learned from another friend of mine, whose mother had before a candy factory. I learned from her how to make candies. You know, what is it called? They sell it here, those cubicles of milk and toffee. Could it be toffee?
Taffy.
Taffy? Yeah, it was taffy candies. She taught me how to do it, and in fact, I worked with her in the ghetto, and this too was one way for me to make some money, because at night we made it, and in the morning I brought it and I sold it here, sold it there. This was one of my sources of supply. By the way, my parents did participate in building a school. They managed to build a school. Other teachers came with them, and finally, towards the end, the Jewish community was paying some sort of a salary. So it wasn't I who supported my parents totally, they were earning some money too. They both worked and both earned some money. Now, when I came there to the Belkins, I said, "Look, I know how to cook candies. If you bring me milk and sugar, I'll cook candies, and you can sell them to the people you meet." You see, the workers were taken to a factory. The factory was not where we lived. The factory was some distance away. They were coming with buses. They were taking them every day back and forth. The real experts, those farriers. And as they were coming there to work, they had contact with the gentle community, with the gentle population. So I was cooking candies, and they were selling them. And I was selling some inside Kailis. This is how I earned some money to pay them. I was cooking the supper for them. When they came, they had something to eat. I felt obliged, of course, to repay them for the favor that they kept me there. And there in Kailis were also purges. And during one, they hid me on the roof. On the roof of the building, under some blankets, and this, they hid me under. It wasn't really the roof; it was the attic. They hid me there for several hours, while the Germans looked for newcomers. It was right after the ghetto was, and after the ghetto was liquidated, the Germans anticipated that there will be an influx of people who didn't belong there.
But how long did you stay there?
Less than a year, about 9 or 10 months. And then I found out that they said that this will be liquidated too. It will stay less than another month, no more. This is when I got in touch with a man who was on the outside, and I asked him to get me a passport. And while I was working still in the garden school, I had access to documents, to all kinds of documents. And I found a birth certificate with a photograph, or without a photograph, a birth certificate of a girl who was much older than I was, but she was no longer in the school, and they didn't care. So I helped myself. I took this birth certificate. With the birth certificate, it was easy for him to get to make me a passport, a legitimate passport, so to say. I gave him my photograph. I got a passport. And now came the question: how do I get out of Kailis? Because Kylie's was, as I told you, it was a triangle. You tell me how much longer I have, and if I don't have, I'll stop.
Well, we don't have very much longer, but we have a little time. So,
So it was like a triangle. Here, this is interesting. This you will want to hear. And after all, that's how I saved myself. So it was a triangle, and on each corner was a watchtower. In each corner, it was really a watchtower, and manned by a policeman, by one policeman. They were changing the guards every 6 hours or so. And they were changing the guards. And so between, let's say, this watchtower and this watchtower, here was a gate, during which they would bring in food and etc. everything. And under the gate, already people dug a little place that one could probably squeeze through, but I couldn't. It was too small for me. So here was the gate. Here was one tower. Here was another tower, and here was the third tower. And we observed them, and they would change the guards in the following matter: that let's say at 1 p.m. this man would walk all the way to this tower. This man would walk all the way to this tower. Here would come 3 new people. They would report to each other. They would stay here for about 5 minutes or so, and then one would go here and the other one would go there, and one would remain here. So, friends, I told them that I was leaving, and everybody told me, if you survive, tell my family here and there, try to remember, this is my family here, this is my family there. And you won't believe it, how many things I actually remembered. I memorized names, and I memorized places. And when I came to Palestine, I gave everybody a report on where, who went, where, whatever I knew. And they were amazed at how much I knew, how much I told them. But the minute I told somebody, I forgot. I no longer bore, again, as psychologists, you might find it interesting or so. The minute I kept my promise, the minute I kept my promise and I told Moshe about his brother, his brother was liquidated in the first ghetto, or the other one that it was all the way through the ghetto, went to such a camp, and went to such a camp. The minute I gave everybody what I was supposed to, what I promised to give, I forgot about it. I no longer remember. Anyway, the friends were with me here near the gate.
When you said you were leaving, where did you plan on going to?
Oh, I planned to go to the man who brought me to Kylie's, in order to go from here to the one that I hoped would let me come.
To Palestine?
No, before. Palestine was as far as the moon.
So you wanted to leave, but where did you plan on going?
I planned to leave to freedom, to be on the Aryan side as an Aryan. I thought with my color of the hair and my language, nobody's going to suspect that I was Jewish. But I was very wrong, and I'll tell you in a minute. I was very wrong. So the friend was standing here, hiding behind together with me, hiding here in front of the gate. This one went, and we saw him that he already reached, or almost reached. He was well beyond seeing me. This one just passed the gate. The minute he passed the gate, my friend opened the gate quietly. I snuck out and crossed the street. I crossed the street. He walked here and I walked there, without looking at him, without him looking at me. He went in here and I turned right. And I went to that man, Jankauskas was his name, to that big Lithuanian, the 7-footer, and I came to him and I said, well, they're liquidating now. I have a passport, I have papers. I want to go to there, because I think that I stayed about 3 or 4 weeks in his house waiting for an answer from this guy. The first time I stayed in his house only 1 night. The second time he kept me, and I was hiding always from everybody. And when I got the telegram, he gave me some money, he gave me some food to take along, and I took the train, and I went all the way to him. And when I came to him, he said Lithuania, and I went to take a job. And it was a job where they required Lithuanian and German. And I took the job, and there were a few Gentiles who suspected me. And they kept telling me, there was one who was singing Jewish melodies, old as Mira. He was singing to wait for my reaction, and of course I didn't react at all. Then, after a month on their job, they suddenly told me that they have to have clearance from the Gestapo in order to keep me there. When I had clearance from the Gestapo, I decided I had enough. So I don't remember what I said, but I said I have to give up the job because I want to go home. So they were very upset to lose me, but I gave up the job. And instead of going home, another Lithuanian family took me in as a seamstress. I knew some sewing, but I was no seamstress. But they took me there, and there too, he had a common law wife, and she would all day, every day she would tell me that 5 Jews were caught here, and they were all executed, and 3 Jews were caught there, and the Lithuanian who boarded them was killed too. All these nice stories. I spent 6 months on the Aryan side as an Aryan, and those were the 6 most difficult months of my life. Then the Soviets came, of course.
I'm still a little bit unclear.
Okay, please ask. It's important that you be clear.
Did this Lithuanian family know that you were Jewish?
No. Only the teacher knew. No.
And why were those 6 months the most difficult months of your life?
Because they told me every day that I was Jewish. They told me, this color hair, your color hair, is not that of a Gentile. Gentiles are either blonde, completely blind, or fiery red.
Would they have turned
This is a combination of a blonde mother and a dark father.
Would this family have turned you into the Gestapo if they had known that you were Jewish?
Maybe. Maybe. I didn't want to take the chance. I didn't want to try out, to find out.
Do you remember the day the Russians came?
If I remember the day the Russians
came back.
No.
Do you remember what it felt like to have it behind you? When did you feel you had it behind you?
When did I feel what?
That you had it behind you.
That I had it behind me? Oh, not for a long time. Not for a long time. With the Russians, for example, I went with the Russians towards Vilna.
Following with them.
Along with them, they permitted anybody to sit down on the truck.
You were hoping that your father was still alive?
No,
or?
I knew that my father wouldn't be alive, but I didn't know that my brother, I didn't want to believe that my brother was dead.
Yes.
Also, I had 1% of a percent hope. I didn't know. I thought maybe I had these cousins, I had uncles. I hoped maybe somebody else. I hoped maybe some friends left, were left. And I was, of course, shocked to find that no friends of mine were back. Not when I came back. When I came back, and again, if you want a little story, I can tell you. Otherwise, ask me your questions.
I'll hear the story.
The story. Okay, the story was such. I lived in not a suburb, but a part of town. Vilna had a river go through it. It's called the Vilia. The Vilia. A river went through town. And so most of the town was on the right bank of the Vilia, and a small part of it, like a suburb, was on the other side. And we lived on the other side, on the suburb. There were the poorer families lived in Shnipishki. And that's where we lived, in Shnipishki. On the river, there was a green bridge. A big bridge, a green bridge. It was painted green. And it was called the Green Bridge. And since I was born behind the Green Bridge and grew up and walked the Green Bridge every day several times, the Green Bridge was to me, well, I don't know how to compare it, but this was the rock of whatever. It was something, part of the universe, an unshakable part of the universe. So after I left Rietavas and walked after the Russians, and then I came to a place where there was a train, and I sat down in the train, and the train went to Vilna. I was in the train, and I got off the train in Vilna, and I said to myself, now I'm going to walk. And this was, the train station was at the other end of town, a long walk. I said to myself, I'm going to walk all the way. And I'm going to walk through the former Jewish quarters. And if I meet Jews in Vilna, fine. I didn't say if I meet my family. I couldn't expect that much, but I said to myself, if I meet Jews in Vilna, fine, okay. If I don't meet any Jews all the way from here to the Green Bridge, I will walk up to the Green Bridge where I grew up, and I'll jump straight into the Vilia, and this will be the end. All right, so I walk, and I hear some people speaking Jewish. First of all, you could recognize them because they were wearing torn clothes. I came over. Are you Jewish? Jewish. Are there any? Where do you come from? Of course, they came from Lithuania. They were not Vilna Jews. Are there any more Jews? Yes. Where can I meet the Jews? Oh, there is a house here, and this street. There is a Jewish community, something like it, in the process of being organized. I walked over there, and sure enough, and there's a list there. You'll find there a list of people. Everybody who comes signs his name, so you'll be able to go through the list. You can imagine the list wasn't that big. You could go through the list and you'll see if you know somebody or not. And I come there. I don't know a living soul. All those who are there are either from Lithuania or from some provinces, none from Vilna. And I look through the names and I don't know a single name. So I ask, are there any teachers in Vilna? Yes, there is no school, but there is an orphanage. And the orphanage is on the Bridge Street. This was the street. It was called Mostova, the street bridge, right near the Green Bridge. So I'm walking to my Green Bridge, and I decided I'm going to walk into this orphanage and see if I know anybody there. And as I walk and I come to the river, I'm shocked. There's no Green Bridge. The Green Bridge was gone. It was bombed. There was some makeshift bridge, no Green Bridge. I had no place to jump from. Anyway, so I went to the orphanage, and there I met a distant cousin of my mother's, whose son was the one who found my brother's photograph. And of course I was very happy to see her, very happy to meet her, and the director was happy to see a teacher. He said, okay, I can give you a job. So I had a job. But I was a little involved with the underground, and somebody told me that the Russians are looking after me, possibly, that there was a suspicion. So I decided to take off a little sooner than really planned.
Where did you go?
Where did I go?
Mm-hmm.
Again, behind the Russians. So there was the next town between Lithuanian and Belarusian, there was Lida. So I took a train to that town. And there, from Vilna, I got some addresses, so I met somebody there. Then I took another train and I went down all the way to Lublin. And as they freed Warsaw, I went to Warsaw. And pardon?
No, I'm just...
And as they freed Krakow, I went to Krakow. And there were already people who were organizing a fleeing. So they sent me to Czechoslovakia. I spent a night in Czechoslovakia. Then I went there. I had to go. Again, it was organized with a group of people. We had to cross the mountains.
The Carpathians.
Yeah. and we had to cross the mountain, and so the Alps actually. And we crossed the Alps in a certain place where it could be. We walked, we crossed the Alps, and we came to Graz. Graz was Austria, and there were soldiers from the brigade. And they were immediately, they were waiting already. As soon as refugees came, they shipped them overnight to Italy. And from Italy, in Italy first of all, we could stay a little longer. Italy was friendly, and from Italy there was a Aliyah Bet organized. But I didn't use Aliyah Bet because it took me a long time to stay in Italy. I met my future husband, my present husband, and we were married, and so I went legally to Palestine. And this is my husband as he looked a little, some maybe, oh I guess this photograph maybe 10 years old. Here is an enlargement of my brother's photograph. I don't know which one. Do you prefer a glossy finish or a glossy is fine because I brought both.
Yeah, thank you.
Somebody is telling you that it's time to go.
You never said where you were born.
I was born in Vilna. Yes, so was my mother before me. Yeah, only my father came from Russia. But I am a Vilna product. I was born and raised in Vilna. I thought I told you.
What year?
I don't want to say it. I'm over 21.
Got that? Okay. Thank you very much.
You made me sign a release. What do you think? The only thing I crossed out from that release is what is called no advertising. The advertising I crossed out. I gave you a release for everything else. So.
Good.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome very much.
You have a story to tell.
I know though. I published. There was Yad Vashem published a book here about a year or 2 years after I came. Yad Vashem had German money, and they published a big book on the Hebrew education and culture in Europe between the two world wars. And then the Jewish World Congress published something in Jewish, and I published for both of them. And because I published these things, I am able to talk so freely.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We will now take you back to
I hope you're making some nice, good films. Yeah, okay.